Keanu Reeves made his way to a stunning Beverly Hills mansion for a scheduled visit, dressed casually and without any flair. As he arrived, the realtor, Christine, couldn't hide the disdain in her eyes. To her, he seemed like just another out-of-place visitor, wasting her valuable time. Little did she know, what happened next would not only make her deeply regret her attitude, but also uncover a truth that would change everything. But before we dive into the story, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you enjoy tales like this, don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow we've got another special story coming your way. The halls of the Beverly Hills real estate office oozed sophistication. Only the most exclusive clients were handled here, and discretion was highly prized. In the manager's office, Keanu sat, dressed simply but with the calm presence of someone who knew exactly what they wanted. There was a subtle smile on his face, but his eyes missed nothing, absorbing every detail of the conversation. The manager, a middle-aged man with a warm demeanor, listened carefully as Keanu spoke. "I'm looking for something functional, but with character," Keanu said, his voice steady and clear. "A place that brings the indoors and outdoors together, a home where I can both work and relax. It doesn't need to be flashy, but the quality has to be in every detail." The manager nodded, jotting down notes. He could tell that Keanu valued a rare balance, simplicity mixed with sophistication. A combination that was often lost on the typical clientele who only cared about showing off their wealth. "I have a few properties that might suit your needs, Mr. Reeves," the manager said. "I can arrange a viewing." Keanu nodded but added, "There's one thing I need. Don't mention my name to anyone. Let's keep the details private." The manager looked a little puzzled, but Keanu continued, "When people know who I am, their behavior changes. They start acting differently, fawning over me. I don't want that. I just want to be treated like anyone else, with no special treatment. I value my privacy." The manager smiled, understanding completely. He'd worked with plenty of celebrities, but none as humble and straightforward as Keanu. "Understood, Mr. Reeves. Your identity will remain confidential. I'll only share the essentials with the agent." With that, Keanu scheduled the visit and left the office quietly, drawing no attention to himself. He trusted the manager to keep his word. A few days later, Christine stood waiting outside the chosen property. The house was impressive, a modern marvel with a glass facade, sleek lines, and a perfectly manicured garden. However, the details she'd received from the manager were frustratingly vague. No name, no specific details, just a description of a client who valued privacy and simplicity. Probably another paranoid businessman, she thought, adjusting her blazer, ready to deal with yet another demanding, egotistical client. Then, a modest car appeared, pulling into view. Christine raised an eyebrow. The car was dusty, a stark contrast to the flashy supercars typically parked outside such homes. When the door opened, she froze in disbelief. A man stepped out, dressed in faded jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and worn sneakers. His hair was a bit messy, and his laid-back manner seemed completely out of place in such a high-end setting. As he walked towards her, he carried himself with quiet confidence. Christine crossed her arms, sizing him up, her forced smile barely hiding her disapproval. "Excuse me," she said, her tone sweet but tinged with sarcasm. "Are you looking for something? This property isn't open to the public." The man looked at her, unfazed. "I'm here for a scheduled visit," he replied calmly, without offering his name. Christine quickly checked her tablet again and, to her surprise, confirmed that the visit was indeed on the schedule. "All right, it seems you do have an appointment," she said, still skeptical. "I'm Christine, the agent for this property. Just so you know, this is a top-tier home, priced accordingly. Are you sure it's what you're looking for?" The man nodded without missing a beat. "The manager recommended it based on what I asked for." Christine raised an eyebrow, clearly still judging him based on his appearance, but she shrugged it off. "Interesting. Well, let's get started," she said, leading him towards the entrance. As they walked, she muttered under her breath. What happened next would shake her to the core, and by the end of this visit, Christine would understand just how wrong she had been about the man standing before her. Underestimate the ability to dream big, even when it's well out of their budget, Christine muttered just loud enough for Keanu to hear as they entered the house. She quickly shifted to her polished, professional tone, though her arrogance was still noticeable. She gestured expansively, showing off the space as if she was determined to impress him, no matter what. "This entryway was designed to make a statement," she said grandly. "It's the kind of space that leaves a lasting impression. Of course, that depends on the kind of guests you usually have over," she added, casting a quick, pointed glance his way, suggesting he probably didn't entertain anyone of much importance. Keanu remained unfazed. He continued examining the house's details without reacting to her thinly veiled insults. When they entered the living room, Christine tried again. The floor-to-ceiling windows are made of high-quality tempered glass. It's the kind of feature sophisticated clients appreciate because it creates a seamless connection between the indoor and outdoor spaces. Keanu scanned the room, but instead of showering her with the praise she expected, he asked, "Is the acoustic insulation effective?" Glass can often be a weak point in that regard. Christine paused, thrown off by the technical question. "Of course it is," she replied, her irritation creeping into her voice. "This property isn't for clients worried about minor technicalities. It's for those who value luxury and design." They moved on to the kitchen, and Christine hoped to regain control. These Carrara marble countertops are some of the most expensive on the market. They're perfect for impressing guests at dinner parties or social events. "Do you host many of those?" she asked, her tone more probing than curious. Keanu walked over to the countertop, lightly running his fingers over the surface. "It's beautiful, but Carrara marble is porous. What kind of treatment did you apply to prevent stains?" Christine sighed, frustrated. She hadn't expected such specific questions and felt the conversation slipping from her grasp. "As I said, this is a high-end property. All materials were treated for durability. I'm sure it won't be an issue for someone with experience," she said, throwing in another subtle jab. By the time they reached the upper floor, Christine's impatience was evident. She rolled her eyes when Keanu paused to inspect another detail. When they entered the master suite, she opened the doors with dramatic flair. "And here we have the master bedroom," she announced. "It's the kind of space that really represents what it means to live with class," she said, placing extra emphasis on the word class. "Some of my clients love to show this room to their friends, but maybe that's not something you do, right?" Keanu ignored the comment and walked over to the windows, surveying the backyard with its fruit trees and infinity pool. He smiled slightly. "This is exactly what I was looking for, a place connected to nature." Christine stood there, stunned. She couldn't wrap her head around how someone who seemed so simple, so calm, could be so confident in his choices. He has no idea what he's getting into, she thought to herself. What she didn't know, though, was that the man standing in front of her was none other than Keanu Reeves, who had intentionally chosen to keep his identity private, wanting to avoid the exact type of fawning attention that Christine seemed so eager to shower on other, more obvious clients. Christine adjusted her posture and tried to regain control. Her forced smile and over-the-top gestures were painfully obvious as she continued the tour. Deep down, she had already decided the visit was a waste of time, but her surface-level professionalism kept her going. "I'll show you the property in detail," she said, trying to regain some power over the situation. "Though, I'm sure the style of this house is meant for people with refined taste," she added, her voice dripping with passive aggression. Keanu either didn't notice or simply chose to ignore the remark. As they entered the main living area, Christine was eager to highlight every extravagant design element, her enthusiasm so forced it bordered on uncomfortable. "This space was designed to create a visual impact," she said, practically gushing. "It's the kind of living room that turns any casual gathering into a magazine-worthy event. Of course, that depends on how you use the space, but I imagine that's not something you do often, right?" She stole a quick glance at him, expecting some kind of reaction. Instead, Keanu simply walked over to the windows, ran his hand along the metal frame, and asked, "Are these windows resistant to extreme weather conditions?" With so much glass, that could be a concern. Christine froze for a moment. Her frustration mounted as she realized he wasn't reacting to her earlier comments the way she expected. He wasn't caught up in her game. She took a deep breath and tried to maintain her professional tone. "Well, this property was designed for clients who don't exactly." Christine's frustration was bubbling over, but she tried to hide it behind a thin smile. "I don't think you'll need to worry about those kinds of details," she said, pausing for emphasis as she flashed a condescending grin. "People who buy homes like this are usually more focused on aesthetics than practicality." Keanu, however, simply nodded, unbothered by her passive-aggressive remark. He kept his composure, not letting her attempts to undermine him rattle him. "Fair enough, I understand," he replied calmly, his gaze returning to the space around them. As they moved into the kitchen, Christine's impatience was starting to show, but she was determined to keep up the charade of professionalism. This, she thought, would surely be the moment that would impress him. "This kitchen is a true masterpiece," she said, her voice becoming more enthusiastic. "It features Italian marble countertops, custom cabinetry, and state-of-the-art integrated appliances." She spread her arms as though revealing a grand performance, sure this would be the space that would finally win him over. "It's a dream kitchen for renowned chefs. The countertops are made of Carrara marble, and the cabinetry is imported from Europe. It's the kind of space that makes anyone want to host important guests to show off what they have." Keanu walked over to the countertop, running his fingers lightly over the surface. He remained calm, his tone serene when he spoke. "It's beautiful, but how about functionality? Do the cabinets have a soft close system? It seems like a small detail, but it makes a big difference in daily use." Christine, growing increasingly frustrated, tried to mask her irritation. "Of course, they do," she said, her patience wearing thin. "The cabinets, like everything else in this house, are designed for top-tier functionality. It's the kind of thing sophisticated clients don't need to ask about. They just know." Keanu didn't respond, but his smile remained enigmatic. He seemed to be listening carefully to everything she said, observing every word and gesture with an almost amused detachment. He continued to inspect the kitchen, stopping next to the king-sized bed, his eyes scanning the ceiling. "The lighting here is interesting," he said, pointing to the ceiling. "It looks like the design prioritizes natural light. But what about at night? Is the lighting system adjustable?" Christine's frustration deepened, but she tried to maintain her composure. "Yes, of course. The lighting system is automated," she said, though it was clear she was losing her patience. "That's something standard in properties at this level," she added, with another sharp, passive-aggressive comment. "It's the kind of thing sophisticated clients don't need to ask about. They just understand." Keanu gave her a calm look, his smile still subtle. He didn't respond, but it was clear he was aware of every little jab, every little judgment she made. She had underestimated him, and he knew it. Finally, visibly impatient, Christine led him to the backyard. The infinity pool shimmered under the sun, and the landscaping created an oasis of tranquility and beauty. "This is the perfect space for social events or simply relaxing after a long day," she said, emphasizing the last part. "Of course, that depends on the lifestyle of the owner," she added, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Keanu smiled softly, observing the garden. "This is exactly what I was looking for," he said. "A space connected to nature. That makes all the difference." Christine almost laughed. Connected to nature," she repeated with a sarcastic tone. "Well, for those who value that, perhaps it's ideal. Although, for some clients, the focus is more on impressing others than on relaxing." Keanu turned to her, still wearing the same calm expression. "Sometimes, it's better to impress people with who we are rather than what we have." For the first time, Christine was at a loss for words. She felt uncomfortable, though she didn't fully understand why. She still couldn't quite grasp why she felt the way she did, but what she didn't realize was that she was treating Keanu Reeves, one of the most beloved figures in Hollywood, as though he were an insignificant person. Christine tried to regain control of the situation, but she could feel the power slipping from her grasp. She led him through the house, her patience now wearing thin. Her forced smiles, the sharp remarks, everything about her behavior screamed discomfort and disdain, though Keanu remained unruffled. Deep down, Christine had already written him off. To her, this casually dressed man with his calm demeanor didn't belong in a house like this. With every question he asked, her irritation grew. He was clearly acting like an expert, but she was convinced he didn't belong here. He's probably not even going to buy anything, she thought. The manager must have been joking when he scheduled this visit. When they reached the second floor, Christine decided it was time to speed things up. She opened the door to one of the guest bedrooms, gesturing toward it briskly. "This is one of the guest rooms," she said, her voice tense as she tried to power through the tour. What Christine didn't know, though, was that she was about to make a huge mistake. Keanu's quiet presence, his sharp observations, he wasn't just any casual visitor. The truth about who he was about to hit her like a ton of bricks, and it would change everything. The tour exchanged awkward glances, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding scene. The weight of the moment was impossible to ignore. Christine's smile had long since disappeared, replaced by a nervous tension that seemed to radiate from her every movement. The truth had hit her like a ton of bricks, and the realization of her monumental mistake hung in the air like a thick fog. Keanu, still calm and composed, continued speaking to the manager, but Christine could feel every word slicing through her. It was no longer just a matter of a lost sale, it was about respect, dignity, and the blatant disregard she'd shown to someone she now realized was far beyond her scope of understanding. "Before we get into any details about the contract," Keanu said, his voice still serene but laced with an undeniable authority, "I'd like to make sure we address how we can ensure that future clients, regardless of who they are treated with the respect they deserve." The manager nodded, clearly acknowledging Keanu's point with a new level of respect, though Christine could barely muster the courage to meet anyone's gaze. She stood frozen, trying to come to terms with what had just happened. She could feel the heat of embarrassment creeping up her neck, and her mind raced as she replayed the entire interaction in slow motion. Keanu's words echoed in her head, "You didn't need to know who I am to treat me with respect." The simplicity of the statement was profound, and in that moment, Christine understood just how far she had gone wrong. She had let her arrogance cloud her judgment, and now she would pay the price, not with money, but with her reputation and credibility. As the conversation continued, Christine noticed the awkward stares from the interns and staff. It was clear that the news of who her client really was spreading through the room like wildfire. The photographer, who had been documenting the tour, had discreetly lowered his camera, sensing the tension in the room. Keanu's patience was unwavering, and his composed demeanor made it even harder for Christine to defend herself. She wanted to apologize, but words seemed useless now. How could she possibly explain how she had allowed her assumptions to cloud her actions? She had underestimated him, and in doing so, she had failed in the most basic of ways, respecting another human being. The manager, after a few moments of silence, finally turned to Christine. His eyes were sharp, a look of mild reproach in them. "Christine," he began, his tone quiet but firm, "this is not how we do things here. We are in the business of helping people find homes, not judging them based on how they dress or how they carry themselves." Christine's heart sank as she realized the depth of her mistake. The manager's words were a stark reminder that her role wasn't just about selling properties, it was about providing a service with integrity, treating each client with fairness, no matter their background or appearance. Keanu, sensing her discomfort, turned to the manager. "I'm not looking for any special treatment. I just want to make sure that future clients aren't made to feel like I did today, like they don't belong just because they don't fit a certain mold." The manager nodded once more, acknowledging Keanu's point, and Christine could feel her credibility unraveling with every passing second. This wasn't just a failed sale. It was the loss of the trust and respect of the very people she had to work alongside. Of course, Mr. Reeves, the manager said, turning his attention back to Keanu. We'll make sure we address this immediately. You're absolutely right. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. Christine's gaze fell to the floor, the weight of her actions too much to bear. She had made an enemy of humility and respect, and the lesson, she realized, was something far greater than just a transaction. It was about how she viewed others, and how her own arrogance had led her astray. Keanu, ever the picture of grace, gave her one last glance. There was no malice in his eyes, only a quiet understanding. It was almost as if he was offering her a second chance, a chance to learn and grow, something far more valuable than any commission or sale. I'll be in touch soon about the contract, he said, turning to the manager with a smile that had a hint of warmth in it. I appreciate your time today. As Keanu left the room, the atmosphere slowly began to shift, but Christine remained where she stood, rooted in place. The house, once a symbol of luxury and success, now felt like a reminder of her own shortcomings. And as the door closed behind Keanu, she knew this was a lesson she would never forget, one that would stay with her for the rest of her career. Through with the purchase, despite everything that had happened. In some ways, that was a small mercy. Keanu could have easily walked away, leaving them with nothing but the consequences of Christine's actions. But the fact that he had chosen to move forward with the deal, albeit with an important lesson attached, gave her a moment of reprieve. The room, however, remained heavy with an undeniable tension. The interns, Mark and Susan, stood huddled in the corner, speaking in hushed tones, their whispers laced with curiosity and judgment. The photographer, who had been quietly observing everything, adjusted his camera again, seemingly focused on the shot, but his gaze often drifting to Christine. It was clear the entire room had witnessed her downfall, and Christine could feel their eyes on her, even when she was too ashamed to meet their gazes. The manager, looking slightly more composed but still rattled, turned to Christine with a strained expression. Christine, he began, his voice quiet but firm, this isn't just about the sale anymore. It's about the way we treat people. You've been in this business long enough to know that respect is non-negotiable. She nodded silently, her throat tight. She wanted to respond, to explain, but the words felt hollow now. What was there to say that hadn't already been said by Keanu himself? She had allowed her arrogance to cloud her judgment, and in doing so, she had betrayed the very values the company prided itself on. She treated a client, who had only asked for fairness and respect, as if he were beneath her, when in reality, she was the one who had fallen short. The manager, still trying to hold things together, addressed the team. I need everyone to stay professional. We'll discuss how we handle these situations going forward, and how we can better serve clients without any preconceived notions. Mark and Susan nodded, though their faces betrayed the gossip that was undoubtedly circulating in their heads. Christine could feel the weight of their judgment, but this time, she couldn't brush it off. Christine, the manager said, his voice softer now, I'll need you to step into my office for a moment. Her heart sank as she followed him into the back room. She knew what was coming. He would have to address her behavior formally, likely with a reprimand. And beyond that, she could already feel the whispers beginning to spread. Her reputation, already fragile, would likely be irreparably damaged after today. As they entered the office, the manager closed the door behind them. He turned to her, his eyes tired but resolute. Christine, I need you to understand that what happened today is not just an embarrassment for you. It reflects poorly on the entire team. We all need to learn from this and ensure it never happens again. You're an experienced professional, but today you failed to demonstrate the most basic professional courtesy. That's something we cannot tolerate. Christine swallowed hard. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, but she knew she couldn't. The truth was undeniable. She had failed in a way she couldn't explain, and now it was too late for excuses. I understand, she said softly, her voice barely audible. And I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. The manager sighed, rubbing his forehead as if trying to collect his thoughts. I'm going to have to report this incident, Christine. The rest of the team is going to hear about it, and we need to show that we're taking responsibility for our actions. You've lost the trust of some people here today, and that's going to take time to rebuild. She nodded again, feeling like the weight of the world was pressing down on her shoulders. She knew the damage had already been done. The entire team had witnessed her failure, and no amount of explanation would undo what had transpired. This wasn't just about a sale, it was about her character, her professionalism, and how her actions had undermined both. Back in the main room, the atmosphere had shifted. The interns had already begun packing up their things, the photographer now taking a few last shots of the property. No one spoke to Christine directly, but she could feel their stares, the whispers that had started as soon as Keanu had left. As she re-entered the room, the reality of what had just happened set in. She had treated someone with complete disrespect, someone who deserved far better than the condescending attitude she had shown him. And while Keanu had been gracious in his response, she knew that his forgiveness didn't erase the fact that she had shown him, and the team, the worst side of herself. The manager came out a few moments later, his face still tight with concern. "We're going to have a meeting later today to address everything. I want you there, Christine. We need to start working on rebuilding our reputation. And you, specifically, need to show that you're taking responsibility for your actions." Christine nodded wordlessly, her mind still reeling. She had just experienced one of the most humbling moments of her career, and she knew that she would never forget the lesson it had brought her. In the world of real estate, where appearances mattered so much, it was easy to forget the most important truth: treating others with respect wasn't just a business practice. It was a fundamental value that should transcend everything else. As the manager finalized the sale and Christine left the office, she couldn't help but feel the crushing weight of what had just transpired. Today had been a turning point, a moment that would stay with her far beyond any property listing or deal. And as the sound of Keanu's car engine faded away, Christine knew her journey toward redemption had only just begun. The finality of the moment hit Christine like a wave. Keanu's words were direct, but there was no malice in them, just an unspoken understanding that she'd learned a hard lesson, and that was, perhaps, the hardest part of all. He hadn't stormed out in anger or made a public spectacle of her mistake. Instead, he'd shown her the type of grace that only someone with real humility could possess, and in doing so, he'd left her with a sense of responsibility, something far more powerful than the embarrassment she was drowning in. As he handed over the contract and left the room, the silence that followed felt heavy, almost suffocating. The manager, though visibly shaken, seemed more focused than ever, perhaps now more determined to steer the team in a direction of respect and professionalism. The interns, still hanging back in the background, exchanged quiet looks, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, judgment, and even some pity for Christine. It was impossible to ignore the weight of the situation. She knew the whole team would be talking about this for days, maybe weeks to come. The manager finally exhaled, his voice softer but still serious. "Christine, I don't care who the client is. Everyone deserves respect. No one is above that. If you want to stay on this team, you need to show that you understand that, not just with words, but with your actions." He paused, letting the words settle in the air before continuing. "This is your last chance. We don't get many of those in this industry." Christine nodded silently again, the lump in her throat making it hard to speak. She wanted to explain, to express how badly she regretted her actions, but the words seemed hollow and useless now. The damage had been done, and no apology could undo the public humiliation she'd experienced or the lesson she'd learned. As she stood there, her heart still racing, she knew that this would be one of the defining moments in her career. The way she moved forward from here would determine everything. She couldn't afford to let her pride or fear control her anymore. She had been given a rare opportunity to learn, to grow, and to prove that she was better than the mistakes she'd made. The question now was whether she would.